hot here. Welcome to Black Love, the Black Love panel for the Juneteenth Book Festival. And today our guests are Beverly Jenkins, Farrah Rochon, and Rebekah Weatherspoon.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Oh, and I'm Alyssa Cole. Hi. And today we're just going to be talking a bit about writing romance, writing Black romance, and writing romance as Black women. So to get started, can each of you give a quick bio for yourselves about your writing career, what you write, and introduce yourself to anyone who might be watching? But let's start with Ms. Bev. You can start first.
Yeah, go first. Come on.
I was waiting for somebody to step up. Beverly Jenkins, first published novel was 1994, so I've been at this a while. Write basically historical romance, 19th century African American stories. Have also written contemporary romance, and then I have 2 young adult historicals.
And romantic suspense.
Oh yeah, those 2. 5 of those. So I like playing in all the sandboxes.
And a short fantasy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Short fantasy. A dragon book.
Yes.
See, this is why I have all y'all around here. Y'all, I don't even have to answer any questions. Y'all just take over, and I'm like, fine. I can just sit here and just smile and nod, as my daughter says, smile and nod. So I appreciate the help. Thanks.
Rebekah.
Hi, I'm Rebekah Weatherspoon. Sorry, I don't know why people are texting me and why my computer is giving me alerts for it. I write also, oh, good Lord. Sorry, I'm trying to shut that off.
I thought that would be my dad.
It's my computer. It's not my,
Popular lady.
It's not my phone. Sorry about that. I write a little bit of everything. Also, I write queer romance, I write paranormal, I write contemporary romantic comedy, a little bit of romantic suspense with BDSM elements. So I'm kind of also all over the board. I've been writing published for 8 years now. And it's been an exciting journey. Interesting to see what the next few years hold.
Yes. And Farrah.
And I am Farrah Rochon. Unlike these 2, I stick in one lane. I am contemporary romance. I realize all I write is contemporary romance.
But contemporary romance is a multi-lane highway. You write a lot of different things in contemporary romance.
Yeah, you could say that. All right. To me, it's just contemporary romance. I've been published since 2008, I think. I always get it confused. I'm like, I think I sold in 2007, became out in 2008, I don't know. But been doing it for a little while now, both traditionally published and indie published, or, hybrid. And yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's your new book behind her too, right there.
Yeah,
that's the new book. That's the new book behind me. Yes. I've heard that people are already tired of seeing the cover, but I don't care.
Oh,
no one could get tired of that cover.
Nobody care about the haters.
Look at it. Yes, that's my new book, The Boyfriend Project, that I am very happy about.
Yes, and it's a really good book. So read it if you haven't yet. And I write like a little bit of everything too. I started with romantic suspense, and historical, contemporary, sci-fi, and now thriller with romantic elements, I guess. So we all have, I think, between us a little bit of experience in kind of most aspects of publishing, whether it's traditional or indie. And one thing I thought would be good, so this past week there's been a lot of discussion about how much authors are paid, but I think that's part of the overall thing of what is the experience of a Black writer in publishing, and for us Black writers in romance publishing. So if everyone wanted to, can you talk a little bit about your experience either in traditional publishing, or how did you get started, and if you have any thoughts about that? Like for me, I started with a small digital press, Lucid, and I had like a short with the Wild Rose Press. And then I did indie um, historical novellas, anthologies with other writers who wanted to kind of get some diverse romance out there, more diverse romance, historical romance out there. Um, and then I was with Carina Press, which is a digital imprint of Harlequin. For print for print publishing, my first book was with Kensington, and my editor was Black, and my PR person was Black, and my cover designer was Black. So it was like not the usual, I think, experience for entering to traditional publishing. And then and that was S.E. Soga at Kensington, and then for my historical series, then for my contemporary series, I was with Erica Sang at Avon, who is Asian. And so I think my experience has been a little bit atypical as far as like what, I don't know, like my entry, it wasn't like dealing with anyone who was like, no, you can't write that, or this is too whatever. Although of course the outer branches of publishing are mostly white, I was kind of in this little insular ball of people who are generally supportive as much as they can be within, you know, the publishing system itself. So how about everyone else? Can you talk a little bit about your experiences, you know, starting in publishing and anything you had to deal with, whether good or bad? Because I know we've all had good things and also bad, stressful things. So, sorry, my door just flew open. Okay, so Bev, you know, you've been at this the longest. If you would want to talk a little bit about how things were when you entered the publishing industry, as far as writing.
When I started, of course, it was mostly all white. There was me and then the ladies over at Arabesque. So we all hit the marketplace in the summer of '94. So we call that the summer of Black love.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was me at Avon, and and for those who are wondering, I've been traditionally published since the beginning. They bought my first book in '93, published in '94. So we had the summer of Black love. So it was me over at Avon, and then great writers like Donna Hill and Brenda Jackson and Betty Ford and Rochelle Allers and Gwen Forrester over at Kensington's Arabesque line. My experience has been sort of, at least editorially, sort of like Alyssa's, in the sense that I've had 4 women of color, 4 editors. I had Erica. I had Essie as an assistant. Monique Patterson, who's now running things over at St. Martin. So I have been very, very blessed editorially. I have never had anybody tell me not to publish some things, or any pushback on what I write or who I write about or how I phrase it or any of that. So I have been blessed in that sense. But I was out here by myself for a long time. I was praying for y'all. That, you know, me and Brenda's like, well, who are we gonna pass the torch to? And then suddenly, you know, publishing opened up, at least romance did. And now we have Black women who are writing everything. And I think that is fabulous. Money-wise, you know, we were just saying, you know, with the publishing paid me hashtag, we knew it wasn't an even playing field. But the depth of how uneven it was, or is what took my breath away. Because I know when I started, I was making like 27 cents a book. You know, that first, yeah, that first, and obviously, you know, if you're in it for money, you need to find something else to do. I think my first might have been 25. It might have been 1,500. That's so long ago that I don't even remember. But you know, it has increased, but not. It's been no white increase. That's for sure. There's been no white increase. People were surprised. You know, yes, I've made the USA list, but I've never made the New York Times. And as I was saying on Twitter the other day, you know, lots of people love Miss Bev, but not enough people buy Miss Bev. And I think that that is something that we all face.
Yeah.
Alyssa, you should be on the list. Rebekah should be on the list. Farrah should be on the list. The only person who's made New York Times is Brenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not the top of the list.
Yeah.
So before I take up all the time, I'm gonna sit back and let y'all talk. You know, I get out here and be the old lady out of, you know, like the old lady who's yelling at her off her porch at people, you know. So the old lady gonna sit back down right here.
We have time.
I can listen to her just go. Oh.
I do want to talk about that just for a second, because one thing about the list is we're starting to see a bit that it's, you know, people have been saying for a while that it's curated to a certain extent.
Right.
Who gets on, who doesn't. Not to, you know, take anything away from people who have made the list, but it's kind of, we're not really sure what goes into it. And it has become this kind of important marker within publishing that is like kind of just another rung that we're on the ladder that we're supposed to reach. But I feel like most Black authors are not even given the support possible to get that, because and one thing I've really been thinking about, you know, sorry, we're just gonna be rambling for this whole session. If you're watching,
ramble on.
But you know, first of all, seeing, you know, these people making these huge sums of money, and it's like, okay, every single person can now get paid $800,000, but when you are a Black author, you often get told like, well, you know, we don't have the money for that, or like this, like it makes it seem like there's this cap, and you know, that's business, that's capitalism, but like the thing that publishing Penny made clear is they have money.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the whole, like, you know, and then about the sales thing, we get told it's kind of like this, like, what is the snake eating the tail? The Ouroboros of like, okay, you have to have a lot of sales, but in order to get a lot of sales, you need a lot of marketing. But in order to get a lot of marketing, the people need to believe that you are going to have a lot of sales. And so it's like this kind of, you know, terrible, this cycle of like, you enter the system, and for a lot of people, they're like, mission accomplished. Okay, you're there. So obviously, you know, they're the dual things. From inside publishing, you're there, so we're good. From outside of publishing, it's you're there, so you must be rich. Because
yeah, right.
I saw someone tweet about your book. You must be rich. If only we got paid in retweets. But so I think there's this like really particular, because obviously publishing is not easy for anyone, but I feel like for Black romance authors, we're always kind of in this vice of like, okay, especially if you're traditionally published and you have any kind of success, you kind of like are in this vice of like, okay, have to keep going. Maybe I'll get more money next time. And then everyone else is like, oh, they must be making so much money. And then like publishing is like, well, your sales were not, you know, so it's like this thing of like trying to constantly create these love stories and happily ever afters, while at the same time, like working conditions are not always so great. So you really have to love happily ever afters to be in this business. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna stop rambling. Farrah, do you wanna talk a bit
Before I
about?
get on me, I'll just say that we don't even get the print runs that will get us to the New York Times list or stuff. You know, it's like things are stacked against us from the very outset. I just had to say that. Okay, so what was the original question? Like how we started, that kind of thing. It's like, what am I supposed to talk about?
All right, I gotta have a cigarette.
So for me, I started with a traditional publisher, Dorchester Publishing, and I was lucky too because for me, I came out at a time where they wanted to start. They didn't have an African American line, and that's what they were starting. So they got Monica Harris, who actually was the editor who started Arabesque. So I got to work with, you know, I credit that woman with the writer I am today. Yeah. Because I was, you know, cocky, thought my words were gold, and you get a 5-page revision letter that's single space and that will humble your ass really quick. It's like, wait, you know, that's what she thought. And she did it nicely, but that's what Monica Harris, you know, as a young writer, she did my first 5 books, and I had no idea how much I had to learn until I worked with an editor who wanted to teach me. So, you know, it's just, thank goodness indie publishing was not around when I first started, because I know me, I would have gone straight, one rejection letter, and I would have gone straight to indie, and I never would have learned what I've learned. And I took that and, you know, went over to Harlequin. I was lucky enough to work with some really good editors there too, and helped to build my audience. And then, you know, that's when I transitioned to indie, because I'm also in this to make money. And I saw that, you know, okay, yeah, I've got the audience, I'm making more money on my indie stuff. I'm gonna just do indie for now. Yeah. And, you know, I got here with the Boyfriend Project because I saw that publishers had started paying Black women some money for books. And I said, well, you know, this is probably my time after 4 years or so to try to step back into traditional publishing, because it looks like they're finally starting to pay us. So that's how I got where I am here. But everything has been like a building block, but that foundation, that started with Monica Harris. It's unfortunate that she left way too soon. She died very young, because she was.
Do we paraphrase for a second there?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Rebekah, do you want to jump in, and then
Sure.
when Farrah's back?
So I started, I was reading a lot of paranormal, and one of the series I was reading was J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and she was very active on her forum, which was great, and she was interacting with fans, and I remember a lot of people, those books are set in New York, and I remember a lot of people were like, we love the books, we love the characters, but like, where are the people of color and where are the queer people? And in her nice roundabout way, she was like, not in my series. And so as I was thinking about what I wanted to write, I was like, I want to write paranormal with people of color and queer people.
Hi,
Barry, you could finish your thought. We lost you for a second.
I don't know. I bought new internet and everything to try to do this. I'm in the country. I'm sorry. I guess you would.
They dropped your call, huh?
Do you want to finish what you were saying?
I have no idea where I started because I finished. Y'all just didn't hear it. I was just the most important thing I was saying was just giving Monica Harris her praise because, you know, she was the best. So move on.
Okay.
Sorry.
I am someone who at one point was extreme. I'm not so much anymore, but I used to be extremely optimistic and fearless and full of hope. Like you couldn't tell me nothing, in the best way. If I wanted to do something, I was gonna bring the sparkle and we were gonna do it. So when I wrote Better Off Read, I had no idea what publishing was like. So I did the research and realized like how you have to query and all that stuff. And I went through all the proper channels and everything, but it didn't occur to me that a book about queer vampires who live under a sorority house would be like a tough sell. I was like, this is fun. Why, like, this is such a fun idea. Why wouldn't people want to buy this? This is great. Everybody loved True Blood. Like, I didn't like understand that, like, and not that I thought I was the world's best writer, but I was like, this is fun. And I know people who I read fan fiction with would like this sort of thing. Why wouldn't publishing want to buy it? So I sent it out. I got actually a really nice rejection letter from Deirdre Knight at the Knight Agency, who just told me to work on my writing, which was legit. And then I got a bunch of form rejections from people. And then I sent it to Bold Strokes Books, and they were accepting unagented manuscripts back then. So they bought it, and that was great. And it was interesting going to my local RWA meeting and, you know, being there in my mid-20s saying, oh yeah, I sold the book in 3 months, and everyone had mixed reactions to that. But Bold Strokes did not, I haven't worked with them in a little while. They were not paying a whole lot, but I think at the time it was kind of like, okay, no one's really publishing mainstream lesbian romance. You know, pulp lesbian fiction had been around forever, but straight up romance novels featuring queer women, like no one was really doing that at the time. And that's Bold Strokes' main focus. So I figured if I have a small press that's really focused on this, let's just go for it. Got like $1,000, and at the time that was a whole lot of money because I was in my 20s and poor, and you know, $1,000 sounds great. My experience with Bold Strokes was interesting. I had white editors the whole time I was there, but they let me write anything. So anytime I came to them, oh, I have this idea, oh, I have this idea, they were like, great. They let me write whatever I wanted to write, until I came to them with an idea for a Black YA. I wanted to write about 2 Black girls falling in love over the course of a summer, and they said no. My erotica was selling very well for them, and me to write more adult erotica, and that kind of took the wind out of my sails, because I really, really wanted to write a YA. So I told them, you know, I'm gonna step back for a minute and reevaluate what I want to do. While that was happening, Harlequin and Cosmo were teaming up for their Red Hot Reads line. And I wrote Fit for that. And I knew what was going on over at Harlequin Fit with 2 white people, just to see what would happen. I said, you know what, I'm gonna send them a book with 2 white people because I know what time it is. We'll just see what happens. They rejected that. And so at that time I was talking to some people like Minx Malone who were doing indie stuff. And Minx was a godsend. She sent me all kinds of resources on learning on how to self-publish.
Minx is a genius.
She is amazing.
Those watching, if you don't know Minx Malone, I want Minx to open her own publisher. She is like,
seriously,
Minx is the business, and she's so kind, and
yeah.
She really helped me a lot. Just learning how to format, learning how to just do all this stuff. And again, that's a wonderful thing about the romance community is it's a lot of hard workers who are doing for themselves, and a lot of people want to help you. So that was wonderful. I changed Fit so it had an Asian heroine, and then I sketched out the follow-ups with all people of color. Self-published that. Fast forward, Fit wins an RT award.
Yeah. So
after that, I was like, oh, the kid can do this. The kid can do this. So I decided to just self-pub a bunch of, fun romances with people of color doing really dirty things. And so far it's worked out. And then I signed with an agent. That didn't work out. Signed with another agent and was able to sell my Cowboy series to Kensington. Not for a whole ton of money, but, enough to get a new computer and buy my dog some pretty things. And now those are out in the world, and we'll see how that goes. I'm still Farrah and I are kind of in the same position with this kind of traditional publishing cycle. My book just came out in basically the beginning of March, so I haven't seen what the big picture of it looks like yet. But maybe we would circle back in 6 months and I'll let you know what target placement actually means for a girl.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
When you started writing, so Betsy talked a bit about J.R. Ward. Did you read romance when you were younger? Because for me, I read romantic things, and a lot of the time I felt like, why don't I see anybody who looks like my parents, my family members, my friends. But I did also have some things, that did have Black people, like fairy tale books that were illustrated fairy tale books that had all of the characters illustrated as Black people, which is kind of like, and it was like, I feel like that had really a huge impact on me. And only when I was an adult did I find out that they were written and illustrated by a white guy who was an art teacher at a school that had a majority Black students. And he was like, none of the books that they were reading reflected what they look like.
Yeah.
He decided to make this series.
That's
I think his name
awesome.
was Fred Crump Jr. But so I kind of had in my head like the dual things of like, okay, we exist in reality. I exist, my family exists, and we love each other. My parents love each other. We are in some of these books, but in all the other, because I loved fairy tales. I loved reading love stories, even if I didn't know what romance was. And so part of it was kind of this part of writing was kind of like, okay, I feel like I need to put these things into the world. And at that time, Bev, your books would have been out already, but I was like, they were not at my local bookstore. The first time I found a romance with a Black woman, written by a Black woman, was Sandra Kidd's The Color of Love.
Okay, yeah.
Which was at the Walden Books in the mall by my house. So like that was the first time I like really like had a concrete idea of like, oh, this book was written by someone who looks like me and who writes stories kind of like what I want to write. And then like the heroine. So kind of like do you remember the first time you saw yourself represented, if ever, in a romance novel before you wrote one?
No. But I grew up in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So nothing represented me.
Yeah.
Except for the Black classics, which my mother made us all read. But I tell people she was Black before it was fashionable. So I grew up with the history and I grew up with the literature in my home. But, the only romance, and I've got 4 sisters, the only romance we got on was TV, was, Doris Day and Rock Hudson, who turned out to be gay. The few movies that were out. So there was really nothing concrete to hook my love for a love story on. And in fact, I wasn't even writing for publication when I wrote Night Song, which was my first book. I was writing just for me because the market was closed, basically. So all I ever wanted to do in life was work in a library. And I had that. And then, sometimes the universe says, well, here, put this hat on. So I sort of stumbled into this writing thing and I've been here ever since. But other than the reinforcement of being who I was at home, we had very little at that time. Growing up until, Black people were again discovering in like 1965, right? And then Watts, so, until then we really didn't exist.
Yeah.
So the idea that I'm doing this still amazes me. That's my speech.
For me, and if I go out, I'm gonna just get back in again. I'm not scared, I'm gonna go out. But for me, it's funny because the first romance I ever read with 2 Black people was written by a white woman. Because when I first started, like really got into reading romance, it was my favorite historical romance author. And it was back in the day where all the publishers had like these message boards where readers could get together before social media really blew up. And they were all reading this author. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the library and get one of her books. So all of these people are reading this author. And I go to my library and they hand me this book. It was the only one they had in my library by her. And it was Suzanne Brockman's Harvard's Education.
Okay.
And I look at the book and I'm like, this can't be right because these are all my white friends. I know they're not reading this book about these two Black people. But it goes into that whole issue we've had with shelving.
Mm.
You know, the first one I read, that was like wait, you mean they got books like this out here? Because all those romances were in the African American section, even in my library.
Mm-hmm.
So I read Delaney's Desert Chic, the first one in Brenda Jackson's Westmoreland series. That was my first. I treasure. I still got the copy. You know, that was my first introduction into Black romances actually written by Black people.
Right.
Because I read romances. So I didn't go because the African American section was where I went when I had to read some type of literature for school. So I wasn't going there shopping for my, books for pleasure. So I had no idea before then that those books even were out there. And that is the disservice that Borders and all those that kept us separate did. Romance readers couldn't even find us. And that's why I couldn't find books that, by people that looked like me when I went shopping. And, that just set me on, once I found out they existed, it was like, well, of course. And this is what I'm going to write because I see it can be done. But yeah, that just shows you that, little girl from a 95% Black town, first Black romance was by a white author, recommended by her white friends when all of them were sitting there already.
And just to touch on that for a second, so I live right now on an island that is 97% Black. When I go to the romance section, it's all translations. I don't check every single week when I go to the supermarket, but the only time I have seen a book by a Black author was Reese Ryan, one of Reese Ryan's Harlequins.
Wow.
In translation. So, and this goes back to the publishing paid me thing, because then you start getting into translation rights and whose books get translated. You can have all of these accolades, and then rarely do you hear from foreign rights translators or foreign publishing houses who want to translate your books, because there's the whole, the idea that they are not universal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense. For example, this island where I live is part of France, and the French has their Francophone African countries, Caribbean countries, but then it's these are not considered in marketing. I hear from Brazilian readers all the time who are like, can your books get translated into Portuguese? But the only books that get translated most are books by white authors or with white characters.
Yeah.
And then that's another form of, not getting paid. I will add that I think that now A Princess in Theory is getting translated into French. But I think part of that is probably only because they know I live in a French-speaking country. I don't, so one of those weird things where it's like, that's just another barrier that we have to overcome, because they could just translate it and people would buy it. Yeah. People are just looking for romance.
They translated, I was so angry. I'm angry a lot. They translated Forbidden into French.
I think I have that.
That's a white woman on the cover.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
No, the version, okay, I will say wait, let me look. The version I got of your book in French does have a Black woman on the cover. So
that's after I started screaming.
Oh my goodness.
No, okay. I can imagine, because the Reese Ryan book that I saw, so it was a book, it was with two books in one.
Yeah.
And I think her book was about babies. I don't know what the other book was about, but there were two white babies on the cover. And I was like, maybe this is about the other story. Maybe this is about the other story. So yeah, I think, that's another.
I was so angry. But my stuff has been translated only over the years into Italian and French. And I'm like, okay, what about the Caribbean? What about South Africa? What about,
Yeah.
all of these women who read romance, because we know they're out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's that whole publishing paid me thing where we're not really sure, what
And
kind of, it's maddening. It's maddening and crazy.
it's also just, I mean, when I think about it, it's bad business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not taking money that's sitting on the table. Like
You're
the cost
leaving
of
money. Yeah. Yeah.
the cost of translation cannot be high enough to make it a bad idea to try translating a slate of Black authors, especially now with so many books coming out and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
But like so many places are just not doing that. I don't know how hard they're being pushed at these festivals where they go to sell translation rights. So, and I mean, it's just, like when we talk about the systemic problems, these
Yeah.
are the things. And it's like, on the one hand, I feel like a lot of times we don't really talk about it because it's like, we all love writing. We love what we do and we feel lucky to be able to do it. But I feel like sometimes it's like, with not just with Black writers, with writers in general, it can be like, well, you are lucky to do what you love, so you should be happy with whatever you get. But I don't think
Happiness don't pay the bills, though.
exactly.
Happiness does not pay the bills. So
And I mean, we can get back to a happier topic after this, but I was just thinking about like, as traditional publishing started to get more diverse, I was also starting to see like so many Black women and women of color like burning out. I mean, I burnt out last year, hardcore. I was seeing pictures of like my writing friends in the hospital. And then it's for these low advanced, you find out.
Yeah.
You find out.
For pennies.
Meanwhile, the person who can write one book a year because they're getting like 100K or 300K, they're feeling stressed too, but it's not they don't have to feel that stress like 4 times in a year just to get a fraction,
And they're not earning out.
Yes. The other thing, a lot of these times these books don't earn out. The confidence that is put into them is not earned. And I think there's just really has to be a general mindset shift that is hopefully going to happen now, that people in publishing really have to think about things besides numbers or put things into perspective.
I was gonna say what you were saying about the shelving and everything. So Bold Strokes books were shelved in the gay and lesbian studies section.
Yeah.
And a lot of, I know in Barnes and Nobles, that's like the way the floor footprint of the store is set up. That's on the opposite side of the store from romance. Yeah, so it's not even near a fiction section. So I remember when I found out Better Off Red was going to be in Barnes and Nobles, I was like running all over the store trying to find it. It's on a bottom shelf in the gay and lesbian studies section next to a book about Stonewall. And like, that's fine, but like it's not nonfiction about gay studies. It's a romance and should be in the romance section. To answer your question, Alyssa, before we move on, my first experience with a Black author, actually one of my fan fiction friends who's also a Black queer woman, she sent me a book by Gabrielle Goldsby, who also burned out, which makes me very sad because she's a great writer and she's now gone back to being a lawyer. She didn't have Black characters in that book. What I thought was interesting, it was a white woman and a Latina woman, but the Latina character was plus size. And the whole book is kind of about her family giving her grief for being plus size and her finding love without having lost weight. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, wow, this is the first time I've read a positive book about a plus size heroine and it's written by a Black woman. And that was a really big deal. But again, that book was given to me. I didn't find it in a bookstore anywhere. The cover, you wouldn't be able to tell that the heroine was plus size. You wouldn't be able to tell she was a woman of color from the cover. The first book that I saw in a bookstore, and I will preface this by saying that my dad is an African American studies teacher, so growing up, we always had books with Black people in them in our house. So I didn't have a sense of like, oh, no one's writing about Black people. I remember my mom was very pro-Black, so even when I was way above my reading level, she handed me Waiting to Exhale and was like, oh, go read this on the porch. I got like
Yeah.
2 pages in because I was like, I'm 12 and I don't care what these middle-aged women are talking about, but I at least was able to hold a book with Black, drawings on the cover and all that. But I remember I was in a really bad relationship for a really long time, and in that relationship, our weekly outings was he would go to Blockbuster and rent a video game, and I would go to Barnes & Noble and drag him around Barnes & Noble till I found a romance that I wanted. And I remember being just in a really bad emotional place, and I saw Bev's Captured on the shelf. And I literally grabbed it and I gasped because I was like, these are 2 beautiful Black people on the cover. Like this is just random Black people off the street. This is beautiful Black people. And I actually pressed the book against my chest because I was like, oh, like this is like, and I think we can talk about this more too. I think that too is the power of not just Black love, but being able to see yourself. And I think in that moment, it was like, oh, this feels like a healthy thing. This feels like a beautiful thing. And I'm not in a healthy thing. I'm not in a beautiful thing. So that also is the importance of even just a cover, how that can be a life-saving moment for someone. So that I think it was really important that our Barnes & Noble had Bev's book shelved with romance. It was easy for me to find. Because at that time, I think I was reading a lot of Maya Banks at that time because she writes pretty steamy and I was into that. So it was really, I wasn't necessarily looking for Black authors, but to just have Bev's book right there, face out, that was like the miracle I needed at that moment. And that again is why shelving is important. International rights are important. Like sales placement is important because sometimes even if a reader isn't deep into romance, if they're in Target or something and they just happen to walk by. And that's been the case with The Cowboy to Remember. I keep getting all these messages where people are like, oh, I don't even read romance, but I was walking by and I saw this and my friend likes cowboys, or the guy on the cover is just hot. And it was next to all these other white cowboys and I grabbed it. And that's important.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story about how the shelving in Borders started. It started at the Borders near me. And it was a sister who was the manager. So go back to when Urban first came to be. The kids who were reading it did not know how to use a bookstore. So she and her staff were spending a whole lot of time taking these little kids by the hand and showing them where these books were. So she said, okay, I'm tired of this. Let me put all of their books in one spot. And then I can say, they're right there. Her sales went through the roof. Corporate, seeing this, not thinking about anything but money, said, oh, let's put all the Black folks in one spot. Which is stupid. Because for romance and for paranormal and for sci-fi and all of that, it's about discoverability.
Yeah.
If I'm a sci-fi reader and I'm looking for N.K. Jemisin, I'm not going to be looking in the Black section of Black literature.
Right.
I'm going to be looking in sci-fi. If I'm looking for Farrah, if I'm looking for Alyssa, or if I'm looking for Rebekah, I'm not going to the urban section. And, and I don't care. Lord love them, they're making money, that's fine. But put your authors in the sections where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's insane. So now we got all this segregation. And I admit some of the readers love that. But as authors, 99.9% of us hate it.
And also it doesn't work if you have a store that doesn't have an African American section.
Yeah.
Or just has like a shelf at the bottom.
Right. Or some stores will just do everything in fiction, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of people don't understand how shelving is different from store to store. And you do need to put stuff by
Yeah.
genre and subgenre. You really
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Or they don't even, like, some of the, like, the accounts, as they call them, the Walmarts and things like that, they don't even sell the African American romance as romance. It's
Right.
a totally different buyer. So, you know, I'm sitting here in New Orleans and my book wasn't in Walmart this week. And I'm not sure if it's going to be there, even though this is this Black city. They're not putting the book. Well, I should say I'm in the suburbs of it, which isn't as Black. But because they don't consider it romance, they have us as something else. That's not even the same person who buys the romance for them. They're not buying our books. They're not going to put them there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so much when when you look behind the scenes at how publishing works, it's so easy to see how we have been set up in many ways to not be able to reach a certain pinnacle because it's not set up that way for us.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it doesn't matter how many people are online, shouting your books if the people behind the scenes aren't putting them out there for people to buy,
Right.
and or you're not putting it in the right place, you just it's not going to sell.
Yeah. Everybody
And
needs to be educated.
and
Yeah,
those
People to the marketing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say those are the people that we never have contact with.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can even be like, oh hey, like are you gonna like we can email our editor or maybe someone from marketing, but like the sales and the people who kind of are responsible for placement and things like that, often we don't know who they are. We can't say, hey, maybe you think this is how things work, but have you considered this other thing?
Yeah.
So it's hard to change those mechanisms from the outside when you don't even know where to start or what they know or what they think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, do you want to talk about if everyone wants to talk a little bit about their latest release or their upcoming release, and just give us we're not finished yet. I'm trying to think of better questions to ask. So while I'm doing that,
You're stalling, in other words.
talk about
Stalling.
your latest release and I'll come back.
Well, since Farrah and Rebekah have books coming out, and I don't, so we'll start with them. How's that?
Farrah, you go ahead, girl. Your book is nice and fresh.
Well, mine is like a few days old in terms of coming out. I mean, mine is the Boyfriend Project. It's funny because it's more, I've been using this term romantic women's fiction more than just romance, because it's a little different from my other books in that the relationship between the three women, they're all young, successful women who society has told that, okay, you've checked off all these other boxes, but you're still single. You need to find a man. All three of them, they get 3 times, I guess, by the same guy who's like catfishing them. And their confrontation with him, one of them is live tweeting her date. And that's how the other 2 women find out that they're dating the same guy. And instead of having a cat fight between each other, they kind of band together and form like this instant sisterhood, and they're going to work on themselves. And a lot of people, I don't like to read reviews or anything, but sometimes people tag me, and a lot of it's like, tag me in your positive reviews. I don't want to see the negative ones. Don't tag me in the negative reviews. But the positive reviews I've seen, a lot of them, it's that part of the book that they kind of resonated with more than anything. So that's nice that people are getting that. So that's the Boyfriend Project in a nutshell. And it just came out very recently.
So where can they find it? Where can they buy it?
Hopefully they will have it in Target. Something happened. So the 23rd of July, June, it'll be in Target, but it's also everywhere else now, online, Amazon. I'm really hoping that people will support indie bookstores, especially Black indie bookstores, because Amazon is doing just fine in these Corona times. Indie bookstores are not. So I know, saving those $3-4 on shipping is important to people right now, but if you want indie bookstores to stay, try to support some indie bookstores, shove a few more dollars out and help an indie bookstore out. But yeah, you can find it all those places.
Awesome.
I got the Boyfriend Project from the Rip Bodice. So that's an indie bookstore that has it. And I actually contacted Leah like a week before and was like, do you have Farrah's book? And she was like, we have Farrah's book. Don't worry. And she made sure I got a copy. So I got that from the Rip Bodice if you want to support an indie bookstore. My most recent one that's out is A Cowboy to Remember, which is a Sleeping Beauty retelling set on a rancher in Southern California. The next book will be a Cinderella retelling, and then the third book will be a Beauty and the Beast retelling.
Awesome.
All three sexy brothers who own a ranch together. I've been having a lot of fun writing it. I wish they were real. These are probably some of the best heroes I've written so far. Zach and Jesse and Sam. And then at the end of this month, the last book in my Beards and Bondage trilogy called Harbor, that'll be out. That's a menage story set on Cape Cod. I'm never writing a menage story ever again. But it was fun to kind of tap into Black people who live on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. I was born on Cape Cod and was raised in New England, and there's a lot of Black folks there. And we have a rich, actually a very rich history in New England. So it was nice to just kind of bring that back. So that'll be out at the end of the month in and print, and you can also get that offline and off it'll be available on Ingram, so you should be able to order it from indie bookstores as well. That's my roommate's cat screaming in my face. Here. Yeah, and that's what's going on with me.
Most recent book was book 10 or 11, book 10 in the Blessing series, called On the Corner of Hope in Maine, I think. So many titles, so many characters, so little information in my brain. The Blessing series, set in a small town in Kansas with Black folks, found families, considered women's fiction, very well received. So if you're looking for something you can binge right now, you can grab all 10 books and go sit down somewhere, and when you get done, maybe the virus will be over. I don't know, so.
Can you tell us the premise of the first book in the series too?
Okay, a woman goes to meet her husband to have lunch. It's her birthday. And she's in her mid-50s. And she get there and hubby is doing the horizontal bop on the desk with his secretary. So rather than say, oh, woe is me, she takes his ass to divorce court. And he is a oil executive vice president. So they got more money than God. And so when she leaves the divorce court on a sunny morning, she's got quite a bit of money in her purse. So, as I always say, rather than buy shoes or Dooney&Burg bags like I would have done, she buys a town off of eBay. And it is a historical African-American town, founded in the late 1870s after the Great Exodus of 1879, which was the very first mass migration of Black folks out of the South. Not to be confused with the Great Migration of 1900, where everybody went north. These Black folks went west. So they formed towns in places like Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado and Iowa. And so come to the 20th century, and these small towns are hurting. No infrastructure, all the young people are gone. So the powers that be in our little town, it's called Henry Adams, puts himself up on eBay, hoping to keep the history of the town and to pay their bills. So girlfriend with the money sees this because she feels that when much is given, much is expected. And so she buys the town, and she used to be a social worker. And so she wants to bring in a bunch of at-risk kids and have them raised old school by the senior citizens that are in the town. And we are off and running. So that's the premise. The first one is called Bring On the Blessings. And as I said, there are 10 books in the series. I'm getting ready to start book 11. I also write romance, so I do 2 books a year. So my next romance will be out in February. It's called Wild Rain, I think.
So excited.
Wild Spring.
Wild Spring?
Wild
Wait,
Rain.
Wild Rain. Wild Rain.
Wild Rain.
Okay, don't get me confused. I'm already confused. I think it's Wild Rain.
It's Wild Rain.
Thank you, Beth.
It's Spring's book, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
it's a Springs book. We met her in the previous historical. She's a lady rancher. Very badass. I had fun writing it. It took forever to write. I think the universe was conspiring against me. I didn't want this book written, but I had a lot of turmoil going on in my life at the time. So, but I finished it. It'll be out in February. And I'm getting ready to start book 11 for the Blessing series. So, yay.
Alyssa, what about you?
Yeah.
What are you doing, Alyssa?
So my latest release was last week. It was the print version of The AI Who Loved Me, which was an Audible original I did that somehow Regina Hall ended up narrating it. I did not know when I started writing it. But so it's a sci-fi romance, futuristic sci-fi romance with a woman living in an apartment complex, and she has her friends, her next door neighbor who she's friendly with. One day, the next door neighbor's nephew appears, and he's really weird. He's recovering from an injury, she's told, and something happens to the neighbor, so she decides to help the nephew out, and then finds out that he is actually a robot, and they fall in love. But there's action, and it's like a romantic comedy, science fiction thriller, basically. And there's a cat.
There's a cat.
And the next book coming out is actually my first thriller. It's coming out September 1st, and it's called When No One Is Watching. And it's basically this woman who grew up in Brooklyn, who moved away. She got married, and she had like a bad marriage. She comes back. She's ready for, to be in the neighborhood where she grew up and knew everyone, and in the house where she grew up. And then the neighborhood is completely changing. And she doesn't know if she's losing it. She had a very tumultuous time when she was away from Brooklyn, so she doesn't know if she's losing it. And she decides to do a historical tour of her neighborhood, because all of these tours have started coming through of people looking at the brownstones and stuff. So she decides to do her own tour. And as she's researching the historical tour, she starts to notice some things that are weird. She also ends up working with one of the new neighbors who has moved in reluctantly, and they start to discover that things in the neighborhood might not be what they've seen. So it's like a gentrification thriller.
Okay.
So I guess one thing I would ask is, what is one piece of advice you would have for up and coming Black romance writers?
I got something.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I got something.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this. I think this goes for all writers, but I think for Black writers in particular, figure out, and this can change over time because we all grow and morph and things change, but figure out what you want. If you want to be an indie author, awesome. If you want to be hybrid, awesome. If you want to do traditional, awesome. Figure out what you want. If you want to be making, I got a house out of this money, or if you just want to be making, I got a new pair of shoes out of this money. Now is the time to really be thinking about what your goals are and how you can tinker with those goals. So, Farrah's talking about doing a little bit of women's fiction. Right now, women's fiction's on the come up. It's coming back. Figure out what's going on in the market. And this is also where being a hybrid is really smart, because you can publish what the market doesn't want necessarily.
Right.
That's what I'm doing. You
Right.
can sell publishing something that is more to their taste. And then if you want to write some weird alien erotica that people will read, by the way,
Yeah.
you can self-publish that.
Yeah.
But figure out what...
Please, more Black romance writers write some weird alien erotica.
Please.
Okay,
please.
that's just a request. That's a request from me. Okay,
Listen, if you're wondering what to write, alien erotica is hot. But figure out what you want. Figure out what the marketplace, because remember, this is a business.
Yes.
And if you want this to be a hobby, Godspeed, let it be a hobby. But if you do want to get paid doing this and you want it to be a career for you, you need to approach this as if it's a business. You need to come up with a plan, and you need to figure out what you need to do, you personally, because you're not anybody else, what you personally need to do to make those goals happen. Right now, I have a spreadsheet that I share with my agent with 20 book ideas. We got on the phone, we looked at the best ones we thought were the most marketable, and that's what I'm working on next for publishers. And then I can write, the next thing I'm writing for self-publish, I'm writing a duology about a witch with sexual powers, and then a demon that's summoned to torture a woman via sex and ends up falling in love with her neighbor. I'm gonna self-publish that. So just figure out what you want and what it needs to look like so you can get paid as much or as little as you think you need to be paid.
I love romance writers. We write every fucking thing. I just love it.
I'm just like, how do you come up? See why I write this contemporary romance? I don't have that in me. Like, where do you even come up with that?
My brain is a very weird place. I don't know if you want to.
I am so jealous. It's like, it's hard enough for me to come up with a name for a character. So like anybody outside of just a regular person can't do it. Anyway, my advice is to, once you get into this business, try to find some friends that you can lean on, because this is, the writing itself is solitary enough. Navigating publishing by yourself, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Try to find you some people that you can trust.
Yeah.
Because you'll need them. You can't say everything you want to say. Don't say everything you want to say online.
Right, Lord.
Find you some friends that you can say that with, and make sure they're people you can trust, because I think a lot of people have gotten burned, saying some things that were supposed to be quiet to the wrong person and it getting out. So try to find yourself some people you can trust to get through this business. That is definitely my advice.
And friends who support your goals as well, and have like-minded goals as well. And even if they don't have like-minded goals, because we have writer friends who are on hiatus right now, not doing much, but they're supporting the heck out of us. So that's really important.
Yeah. My thing is, number one, finish the book. Jesus. Finish it. Stop talking about it.
Yep.
You're a writer, not a talker. Finish the damn book. And my second thing is, they're not going to have me back here. They're like, no more Miss Bev. The second thing is, and I say this a lot too, don't let someone else's success make you feel less.
Mm-hmm.
They're on their path. You're on yours. Your story is valuable. You are valuable, and they both matter. So that's it. My phone's ringing. They can talk to the machine.
I was gonna say, on that last point, I think that's really extra important right now with traditional publishers picking up more diverse authors. That sometimes I feel like it can start to foster a sense of competition when it's not a competition. Like, this is not the Highlander There cannot be only one. There should not be only one.
Right.
So if other people are having their moment, they'll have their moment, and your moment will come when your moment will come. And I think this is kind of tied into what I was going to say that just completely slipped my mind. What was my advice? I think it was about, it's like in the corniest way, be positive. I'm not a super positive person, so I would just say shut up if someone said that to me. But I think that if you are going to last in this business, you have to have not even confidence in yourself, but the ability to not only seek out the negative things that are happening. Because when you focus on only the negative things, that really messes with your head. It
Yes.
makes it difficult for you to write. So if you're like going to look at other people, like I do not look at deal announcements. I see it when people that I know do the deal
Yeah.
announcements, mostly because I don't have the attention span for that. But I know that there are people who look at deal announcements and then go like, oh, why didn't I get that deal? Or that's like what something I was going to write. Just write what you're going to write. Don't like literally, if you look at what anyone else is doing, it has nothing to do with you. Like,
Right.
And if you pay, like, if you're gonna look at it and not be happy, and sometimes people are not capable, sometimes just in a bad mood, sometimes people are in a place where they're not capable of being happy for other people. Don't make yourself feel bad by looking at things that make you feel bad, or don't like think that, like you said, anyone else's success has nothing to do with anyone else. But the other thing slightly connected to that with the idea of negativity is don't take each rejection that you receive as like some kind of moratorium on your entire career.
Right.
It's over now. No. So my first agent, my first editor, my second agent, my second editor, I mean, for traditional publishing, are people who rejected me before. Like, you literally will be rejected all of the time. This career is about rejection. I hate rejection. I'm not going to act like, oh, it doesn't mean anything to me. It hurts my feelings like it hurts everyone else's feelings. But like, if you let it like seep into you, or like take it as a measure of your self-worth, like, I guess that's maybe the better advice, that your self-worth has nothing to do with how much people pay you, with whether you're rejected or not. Outside, your writing is not your personality. It's a business, it's a career. You can be a writer and love being a writer, but like, don't tie everything of yourself into it to the degree that you're getting jealous or angry or feeling every rejection like it's the end of your life. Because you can't maintain a career running on negative fumes. It just will burn you out as much as anything else.
Unless your negativity propels you to write, because some people are rage writers. I have rage written a book before.
Oh,
Haven,
I have too.
Oh, Haven was a rage write. So sometimes, if your anger propels you to greatness, by all means.
See, I don't count that as negativity though. I count that positive anger. Where you're like, fuck you, I'm gonna write this book, is good.
That's
so
motivation.
I guess, but yes,
It's motivation.
Yes, use it as motivation. And always, if you, something that just that ties into that, for if you see someone else, this ties into what both Bev and Rebekah said, like, so if you see, you have to think about what you want for you.
Right.
Like, you can see someone else's success. First of all, you don't know anything about the other person. You have no idea what's going on in their life. We clearly saw, we don't know how much money people are getting paid.
Yeah.
So like, we can't want what other people have. And generally, I feel like the more useful thing is seeing what someone, if you see someone else achieve something and you feel any kind of way about that, then say, what can I do specifically with what I'm writing, with what I'm, like, whatever your thing may be, what in my genre, or another, do I want to try another genre? Like, what you as a writer in that moment, what can you do that you think will put you on the path to achieve that? and what will that achievement look like for you, because it won't look the same way as it does for that person.
Yeah.
So kind of in that way, not be self-centered, but if you are going to like have these feelings, you need to really focus them on yourself and what you are going, because that's the only thing you can control.
Right. Yeah.
You can't control publishing, you can't control other people, you can't control what other people react to. All you can do is control what you are doing.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that, you know, we know even in romance where there's happily ever after, it doesn't mean that everything has worked out exactly how the people wanted it to work out. But it's the only thing you can control.
Yeah.
Things will be bad sometimes, but you just have to keep pushing.
Yeah. You can't have somebody else's blessings.
No, you can't.
Their
Unless you
blessings,
want.
their blessings are
you-
for them, not for you. Yeah.
We had a great face-to-face with Jane Ann Krentz, who came to the bookstore here a couple years ago, and she's been writing for a long time, and I thought the best thing that she said was that she didn't give up. And she was very, very clear that a lot of her books sucked, a lot of her books flopped, and she was like, the only reason I'm sitting here at this ripe age is because I didn't quit.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing to remember, is that as a lot of us are, getting older, and we realize that this is a journey. It's not, there's not a final destination. The final destination is the grave.
Right.
So while
we're
on this journey, you have to take every up and down as it comes. And if this is something that you want for yourself, if you want to be a writer, the main thing, like Bev said, finish your damn book. That's like the first thing. Because you ain't a writer if you didn't finish the book. Sorry. But also, you can't give up. Every book might not be a winner. That's okay. It's still going to be someone's favorite, by the way. The book you hate is going to be someone's favorite.
Exactly.
And you just have to keep going. All the greats, Miss Bev included, Nora, Brenda, everybody, they didn't get to where they are by giving up.
No.
So you just got to keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
We got our 5-minute warning, Alyssa.
Yeah, y'all got to stop talking. Y'all got to get up from out of here. I don't care where you going, but your asses got to leave here.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. I actually, if you can, name 1 or 2 books by Black romance authors that you've read recently, or that you would recommend anyone watching to read.
Okay. I can start. Quanah Jackson's Real Men Knit and Sharina Harris's I'm Perfectly Happy. Both of them I recommend.
I will recommend, the first one that popped to mind was Janine, His True Alpha by Cynthia Higgins.
Yeah.
And it is a werewolf paranormal romance set in a historically Black town. After an enslaved woman was freed, she started a town of Black werewolves. And it's great. It has a female alpha, and she shows up in town. She's fleeing her own pack, which is kind of messed up. They have their own issues. And it's just a great read in general, and a great paranormal romance read. I have other ones, but someone else can go.
Go ahead, Bev.
I got nothing. I'm a fantasy reader, so I read his alpha book. That was fabulous. That's great. Lush Money, which is sort of a romance. Gods of Jade and Shadow, which is a paranormal kind of Mexican kind of. I read everything. So yeah, and I'm still touting Nora Jemison's The Broken Earth trilogy because she's earned it. Don't ask me questions I can't answer.
Sorry. I know it does put you on the spot when you don't have your Kindle next to you.
Right.
Be like,
And you're a woman of a certain age who has insufficient memory at this time. So
Bex, have you read it?
I on deck, I have my copy of The Boyfriend Project waiting for me on my nightstand. And I also have Nina Crespo's Cowboys Claim.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So those two are waiting for me. Currently I'm reading, I'm so excited. Yvette Hines, she writes contemporary
wow.
she writes contemporary and paranormal, and I thought she'd quit writing because she
I
hadn't
did
put out a book.
too.
And last week she put out another installment of her Bear Shifter series. It's called Bear Snow, and I'm like halfway through. Her books are so good. If you haven't read her
She's so
paranormal,
awesome. She's so awesome.
the first one is called Bear's Gold, and they're all like kind of twists on fairy tales, and they're set in like a bear town in the Pacific Northwest. And it's like a multicultural bear town, which I love too. So this is an IR romance. So I'm reading that now, and it's really good.
Cool.
I thought she had quit writing too.
She's back.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Farrah, I got you on my Kindle, so I'm gonna get to you soon too. Yeah.
Mia Sosa's why isn't
The Worst Best Man. The Worst Best Man.
Yes, The Worst Best Man. Also a great romantic comedy. And I did just finish, it has romance elements. Tracy Dion's Legendborn.
Yeah.
It's contemporary fantasy with like Arthurian legend and Southern history and culture like mixed together, and it was really, really good, and I'm obsessed with it, and sad that the second book is not out yet because the first book didn't even come out yet. It was an art. But yeah, so that's.
I want to say thank you to Oprah Magazine for the great read we had this morning with all of us on this fantastic list of great romances to read. So it was a good thing to wake up to this morning. So
Very much so.
yeah, it's very good. Very good. All right. I got a garden full of weeds. I'm getting ready to go out there with my weed whacker and get rid of all of this damn milkweed. I'm sorry, Monarchs. I love y'all, but shit's everywhere. So.
All right. Well, thank you all. It was good to hang out with you this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ms. McKinney, for having us
Thank
here.
you.
All right.